Blake Lively is destroying feminism. Hello everyone and welcome back to The Chanel. The other day, I spent some time reading Justin Baldoni's deposition because I wanted to see how he responded to Lively's attorney's questioning. And I also wanted to get a better idea of what questions Lively's attorneys would be asking. Needless to say, I have a lot of thoughts about all of this, and it led me to start reading Jamie Heath's deposition as well. And let's just say, after reading both depositions, I'm just shocked at the unprofessionalism of Lively's attorneys and how they kind of freak out on Jamie Heath at one point, and how they ask some really pointed, unnecessary questions that I feel like are just unprofessional, unnecessary, and don't really add anything to the case. And the way that they ask these questions seems more like they are trying to get both Justin and Jamie to admit something incriminating that not necessarily relates to the case, but something that they could just feed the press and slander their name even more. But joke's on y'all, Lively attorneys. We're not falling for it. So I'd like to go through Justin's deposition first, because I found some things that I really want to highlight that I think are important to talk about. Just an obligatory disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. I have no legal background. I'm just a silly little goose with some silly little opinions and sometimes very serious ones. So anything I say is just my opinion, and you are welcome to disagree with what I'm saying. I believe that we can always have constructive conversations about these things. So if I misunderstand something in a legal context, I apologize. I really tried to go through these documents carefully and understand what was happening. But unfortunately, with my lack of legal experience, some things are a little bit confusing to me. And because of this, I don't really want to go too into all of the legal things that are happening here. But I do think some of the semantic things are important, and I do feel I have enough experience and knowledge, just as a member of the public, to provide my opinions. All right, so looking at page 20 of Justin Baldoni's deposition, already I am really confused, shocked, and pretty disgusted. Also, just keep in mind that some of these things are redacted and we are missing some key context in some areas of the document, but I do think we have enough information to draw some conclusions. So on page 20, Gottlieb, who is one of Lively's attorneys, asks Justin about an experience that Justin shared publicly about a time that he was sexually harassed by one of the producers on a set he was part of. So Gottlieb asks Justin, "Do you recall being asked the question prompting that answer? Did you ever feel like you were harassed or victimized on set?" And Justin answers, "I don't remember that." And then Gottlieb says, "Okay, but as you sit here today, this is the first example that you have brought up in response to my question of whether you've ever been sexually harassed." Justin then responds, "I think you asked me if I've talked about it publicly." Gottlieb then asks, "Why did you feel harassed by what this producer did?" And Justin explains what happened to him. I'm just not going to repeat it because I don't think it's necessary. All you need to know is that the gist is Justin is describing a traumatic experience where he was feeling sexually harassed. Then Gottlieb asks, "So he didn't assault you?" And when he says he's referring to the person who sexually harassed Justin. And Justin responds, "I wouldn't call it assault. I don't believe I characterized it as assault." Then Gottlieb asks, "You are bigger and stronger than this guy, right?" Justin says, "I would imagine I was." Gottlieb says, "This wasn't someone the size of Dwayne Johnson or The Rock or something like that." And Justin says, "It was not." Then Gottlieb asks, "So if it had come to it, you probably could have knocked the guy out?" Justin says, "I'm not much of a fighter. I would have left." Later, Gottlieb asks, "Did you try and find him after the incident and talk to him about it?" Justin says, "No." Gottlieb says, "Did you find him before you talked about this event in Glamour magazine?" Justin says, "No." And then Gottlieb says, "You didn't want to give him an opportunity to take accountability for his actions and make it right?" Justin says, "I didn't name him." "But you described him and described who he was friends with and the spa you were in." "I don't know if I described who his friends were." "Do you know his name as you sit here today?" "No." "I think you've already talked about your experience with your college girlfriend. Is that right?" "Yes." Then some pages skip, and then we get to Gottlieb questioning Justin about an experience that he had shared previously in some public event, I can't remember where, about how he was assaulted by his college girlfriend. Gottlieb says, "Do you have any idea whether or not your college girlfriend would agree with the way you have remembered the events relating to the losing of your virginity?" Justin says, "I don't know what she would think. I don't know who she is anymore." Gottlieb, "But you thought it was okay to go on TV and tell the world that your college girlfriend had sexually assaulted you without ever talking to her about it?" "I wasn't aware I needed to ask her permission to share my story." Okay, so a couple things here. What is the point of asking these questions? How does this relate to the case? And why, as an attorney whose client is the plaintiff of a sexual harassment case, are you asking Justin about a sexual harassment or assault that he experienced in the past? Maybe I'm dense, but I can't connect the dots. And I'm extra disgusted by the way Gottlieb is questioning. It feels very contradictory to your case to be questioning someone else's assault or harassment claims, trying to minimize them, especially as Justin's claims of sexual harassment or assault are arguably a lot worse than what Blake Lively is even claiming in her complaint. It's also very weird how Gottlieb is emphasizing that Justin is physically bigger than the man who harassed him, because what does that have to do with his harassment claim? If this case is supposed to be a representation of how people who come forward about their sexual harassment or sexual assault claims should be believed, then why are we questioning the validity of Justin's own claims? The only thing that I could think that Gottlieb is trying to get at is that he wants Justin to admit that he would not confront the people who sexually harassed him or sexually assaulted him before going to the press, which would justify Blake not filing any HR complaints. But the biggest issue here is that Blake's were invalidated by the video evidence that Justin's team provided. So actually visually seeing how Blake mischaracterized every interaction that happened, I really don't think it's comparable to Justin. I think what's also really telling is that Blake has refused to release any of her evidence. And I could see an argument that because she is a victim of SH, she's trying to protect some vulnerabilities. I can understand that. But again, the fact that Justin has been so forthcoming of all of the evidence, while Blake has pretty much nothing to prove her claims, and some of her most damning claims were proven to be mischaracterized by the actual video evidence, I'm just really confused. Blake was the first one to bring all of this to the press. Literally, there would be no way that the New York Times would have been able to publish that article without Blake or someone representing Blake tipping them off about the complaint, especially as that article was released only a day after the CRD complaint was filed. Like, there's just no time that the New York Times would be able to create such a detailed article within the time frame that the CRD complaint was filed. Gottlieb also seems to be insinuating that just because Justin is physically bigger than the person who SH'd him, then it's just not likely that this was an actual incident that happened. And if this is the angle that Gottlieb is going for, trying to present Justin as an aggressor who is physically stronger than someone like Blake, at least in the public perception of Blake and this case, I actually feel like that claim would do a lot more damage than provide proof for Blake's claims. This is sending the message that men should be invulnerable. Men can't be victims, and men should man up instead of seeking support. So when we minimize men's experience of sexual violence, we are contradicting feminism, because feminism is not about making women more powerful than men. Feminism is about dismantling the power structures, regardless of gender. It's about deconstructing rigid gender norms and acknowledging that men can also be victims. And if we're also claiming that this case shows that the public is against the Me Too movement, or people are retaliating against a Me Too case, then this does very little to support that claim. Because the Me Too movement was created to expose abuse of power, to show support for survivors, and to break this culture of silence. So regardless of what Gottlieb's angle is, I don't think it does anything for the case, and I definitely don't think it was necessary to bring up something that could potentially re-traumatize someone who was a victim of SH or SA. The next point in the deposition that I thought was unnecessary and weird was again when Gottlieb brought up Justin's faith. Gottlieb says, "You see in the cover letter that you and Mr. Sarowitz have written for this handbook a reference to Wayfarer Studios being a Baha'i-inspired organization." Gottlieb seems to be asking Justin if Baha'i was central to the production and is kind of getting at the claims that Justin's faith was a cult. Justin answers, "We had many conversations about actually not calling it a Baha'i-inspired organization. So I think legally we did not. And that was mostly because we didn't ever want to make anybody feel like they were working at a religious company. So I believe an early version of this did not have it on there, which is where my memory was coming from, but I do see it here and I don't deny that." Gottlieb also brings up that someone who he refers to as Russell said that when they wrapped, he felt like he had left a cult. And Justin responds, "It wouldn't be the first time people around this case have said I was in a cult." Again, I'm just not understanding what this has to do with Blake's claims. And to be honest, I'm so sick of this Baha'i attack. It just comes off as so bigoted and so unnecessary. And perhaps I am a little bit biased when it comes to this topic, because I do know some people who are part of the Baha'i faith, and they are some of the kindest, social justice-oriented people I have ever met in my life. And you know what? That could be something that's clouding my judgment. And what also could be clouding my judgment is that I also grew up practicing a minority faith. And having had to live my whole life in a country where everything is pretty much based around Christianity, which I'm not saying is necessarily a problem because I understand that that is a majority religion, but it can feel very alienating and isolating because the faith that you practice isn't the faith that the other people around you practice. And so speaking from my own personal experience, with this faith being characterized as a cult, I'm not for it. I can't stand it. And I think it's very important that we use that term, cult, in appropriate contexts, because I feel like it's being thrown around a lot in areas where it's just not applicable. But anyway, this is just something I probably won't let go, and I probably won't see the other side of this just because of my own personal experiences, and it's really hard for me to remove my bias. And actually, now that we're on this topic, I want to address something that I saw in one of Without a Crystal Ball's videos. And I just want to clarify that I am not attacking her, and I understand that everyone comes from different backgrounds, and we can't expect everyone to be correct all the time. Like, that's just not how life works. We need to be able to provide people an opportunity to grow. So because of that, I think it's important that we talk about this as well. So in this video, she said that the Baha'i faith is progressive, but maybe not in the Western context. And then she also says how Iran, the birthplace of Baha'i, where women are forced to cover up, might view the Baha'i faith as more progressive, although we wouldn't see it as progressive here. I don't think she meant this maliciously, but I feel it's very important to address this, especially as the way it came across to me was a little bit Islamophobic. So just to be very, very clear, there is a huge difference between religion and culture. And it's also extremely important that we reject this Eurocentric idea of what we think feminism should be. And again, if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, I do talk a little bit about white feminism in my first video about Blake Lively, so I'll link that in the iCard above. But at the core, I believe that all religions have a fundamental system that I would argue is probably universal across all religions. And the difference is how the religious texts and principles are applied in real life. Because religion is an idealized version of life. The principles that are outlined in religions are what we are always striving to become. They're idealizations. And so naturally, it's almost impossible for a human to meet all of the requirements of being a perfect follower of a certain religion. And I also think it's really important that we recognize that the way a society interprets a religion is not the same thing as the faith itself. Yes, Iran is oppressing their women, but it's not because of the religion. It's because of the way that people in power are interpreting religious texts and pretty much weaponizing the religious texts and the religion to justify oppressing others. That's how religion has always worked, in my opinion. It's always been a tool to weaponize and oppress other people, but at its core, it's a very pure concept. Also, just a side note, it really makes me laugh when people say Iran instead of Iran. Just a little chuckle. It's not a big deal, but I find some humor in it. But yeah, in conclusion, I think it's important that we're very careful about how we talk about religion and people's faiths, I think that humans are predisposed to weaponizing their belief systems to justify political authority or power, but I don't think it's fair to assess what is progressive and what is not progressive just purely from a Western context. The other thing I want to push back on regarding Without a Crystal Ball's video was that she claimed that Justin isn't a feminist because he's talking about men and dismantling this sense of men feeling like they can't be vulnerable with each other or act better towards women. This is part of feminism. The intersectionality between genders and how men perceive themselves, how they hold themselves accountable, and how they treat others is central to feminism. So I just did not like that characterization that Justin wasn't a feminist because he was focusing on men, because feminist theory relies so much on the intersectionality of all of the genders. So yeah, I just thought it was important to clarify what feminism actually is, because on the surface, it looks like it's just asking or advocating for women's rights, women's equality, but life is not black and white. Things don't exist in a binary state. Everything is intersectional, so it requires advocacy on all sides of the gender spectrum in order for us to achieve a collective goal where everyone is equal. And around page 119 of Justin's deposition, Gottlieb asks him about the hugging culture that was on set. Gottlieb says that people claimed the hugging culture on set made others feel uncomfortable. And Gottlieb asks Justin if this was something he was aware of. Justin says yes, because Angie Janetti, who is an executive of Sony, relayed to Justin that this culture was making people feel uncomfortable. Justin also mentions that this was something that was addressed at the very beginning of production. Gottlieb then asks, so what did you do when you found out about how this was making people feel uncomfortable? Justin said, I stopped hugging, which is completely appropriate. When someone is telling you that they are feeling uncomfortable by you touching them in some way, you can't retract what you did. The past is the past. But what you can do is accept responsibility and change your behavior. And that's what Justin is doing in this case. And this is where I get super frustrated. And excuse my French, but what the fuck? Gottlieb says, did you perform an investigation? Justin responds, because people didn't want there to be as much hugging? That's my question. No. Did you inform anybody in HR? I did not. Even though hugging is one of the items that appears in your sexual harassment policy, I was unaware of any official complaint of the hugging. In fact, quite the opposite. So I'm sorry. In what world do we launch an investigation because people were hugging, or people felt uncomfortable because of hugging? Justin did exactly what he was supposed to do as a supervisor. Someone expressed to him that the hugging made them feel uncomfortable, and Justin rightfully responds by stopping the behavior that made people feel uncomfortable. I don't believe that hugging requires a formal investigation by HR. If the behavior was addressed and it stopped, then what's the issue here? And a couple pages prior, on pages 117 to 118, Gottlieb mentions Blake's makeup artist, Vivian Baker. Gottlieb says, do you know that she testified under oath in this case? Justin says, yes. Are you aware that she testified that there was a culture of hugging on the set of It Ends With Us? I am now. Are you aware that she said that that made a number of people uncomfortable? I find that odd. You find that odd. Why? Because Mrs. Baker was often the one that would run up and give me a hug. So by Blake and Jenny Slate's logic, if Justin is a predator for hugging people on set, does that also make Blake's makeup artist, Vivian Baker, a sexual predator? It's just like Justin in this case is between a rock and a hard place. Damned if he did, damned if he didn't. So yes, as a supervisor, it is his role to correct this behavior and this culture that's making other people feel uncomfortable on set. But that's exactly what he did. He addressed it. What more do you want, Blake? Justin also indicates in his deposition that there are a lot of discrepancies between what Blake was claiming happened at the January 4th meeting versus what he feels like he actually witnessed. If you're not familiar with the January 4th meeting, this is the meeting where Ryan basically chewed out Justin, and Justin explains this meeting as being extremely traumatizing to him, especially as Blake and Ryan were basically accusing him of things that he believed were not true. The first discrepancy is that the official written list was updated from what it originally was during that January 4th meeting. Justin claims with certainty that the list that Blake Lively had read in that meeting was different than what was filed in the docket. Justin also claims that during this meeting, Ryan said that the original script of the film was a complete disaster and that Ryan saved it. Mind you, Ryan is not supposed to be on this film at all. He has no contract, he's not a writer on the film, he has no authority to go in and change the script. Also, if he did make any changes, then this means that he was writing during the strike, which you're not supposed to be doing, making him a scab to the union. Gottlieb also asks why Justin didn't ask Blake about why she was sharing all of her complaints about the set to other people and outside sources. Justin responds, I think it was very clear that when a person publicly unfollows you and also through channels tells you that they don't want you at the premiere or they won't attend, I think I took the hint that I shouldn't reach out to anybody and ask. I did not believe that anything that I had to say could compete with any influence that Miss Lively had. When you're dealing with arguably the most powerful couple in Hollywood with the most powerful friends in the world, mixed with someone who is extremely charming and personable, and has so much to offer someone as young as her, by that point, there was nothing I believe I could have said to her that could affect, and then the page cuts off. But I assume he says something to the effect of, whatever he said would make no difference because Blake Lively is so powerful. Overall, Justin seems to be very fearful and express that he was very fearful during the whole shift in attitude from Blake and Ryan because he knew how powerful they were in Hollywood and how powerful their connections were. And I can only imagine that he was constantly walking on eggshells when communicating with them, especially as he could sense a shift in the way that Blake and Ryan were treating him, and that Blake was being a lot more pushy about having access to the footage and hiring her own editor and requesting to have some time in the editing room. So it only makes sense that with this shift in energy, he would prepare for a scenario in which Blake or Ryan tried to destroy him. And unfortunately, he was right. So it makes sense why he was scenario planning with a PR firm, because he was acting in defense over offense. And through all of the evidence, we can really get a sense that Justin is a very passive person. He's a people pleaser and he wants everyone to have input, which I think is a good quality, but also makes it easy for people to take advantage of him and assume he's a pushover. There is countless evidence that Blake kind of bulldozed in, overtook some of the edits, the writing, and made some creative choices that Justin didn't really seem to be a fan of, but he remains supportive and respectful of what she wants to do. And either that's a result of him being extremely passive or him wanting to be a good person who is open-minded and includes other people in the creative process. You can even see some of Justin's own team getting frustrated with how permissive Justin is being to Blake and Ryan's demands. You can see them pushing back against Justin allowing Blake to bulldoze over him, and you can also see evidence of Justin not being happy of some of the creative choices that Blake is making, but sort of just giving in to keep the peace. And I think that this is a testament to Justin's character. He seems like a very kind, open-minded person who wants to include other people in decision-making. And I also think that this is his biggest flaw, especially in a place that is as cutthroat as Hollywood. I think Justin assumes the best of people, which is actually a very good quality to have. But unfortunately, there are tons of people who will take advantage of that, especially in the entertainment industry. Overall, I think we're kind of at a turning point on the internet. It feels like the more and more time we spend on the internet, we're learning about media literacy and how things can be twisted in favor or in opposition of someone. And this is amazing because we're able to get to the truth of the matter. This is how we've been able to identify biased journalism, biased news outlets, and it feels like all of us are actually in search of the truth now, instead of blindly believing whatever is presented to us. I also think that's why we see so many content creators coming out in support of Justin, because they can see what the facts are. A lot of the mainstream news outlets seem to be framing Justin as still the villain and propping Blake up as the victim. But a lot of the content creators that I'm seeing are not falling for the BS. They're clocking it right away by looking at the evidence themselves and coming up with their own opinions. It's refreshing to see these content creators actually seek out the evidence by themselves instead of just following what the PR says. I think it says a lot that the PR for this case, even though it favors Blake a lot more, doesn't seem to be working in the eyes of the public. People see the situation for what it is, and I'm hopeful that this is the start to actual justice. And actually, there was a huge win for the Wayfair parties that was announced just in these last couple days. Judge Lyman has rejected Blake and relevant parties' request to seal their evidence. And this is huge because we will finally see what exactly Blake was doing behind the scenes and why she was so adamant to try to seal her documents permanently. And I am so anxious to see what all Blake was hiding from the public, because with how hard she was trying to seal all of those documents, I just know that there is something extremely nefarious that she doesn't want to get out to the public. Alrighty, well, that's all that I have for you all today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear what you all think will happen next, and if you have any theories about what Blake might have been doing behind the scenes. I can tell you that I am so anxious to see all of those unsealed documents, and I especially want to see the text messages between Blake and Taylor. I also want to take a moment to thank you all for watching my videos. It's been really exciting to see this little community growing and seeing what all of you have to say. I'm really excited for what's to come, and I would love to also hear about what you think I should cover next. And if you're new to my channel and you like this video, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. I would love to have you as part of the community as well. Alrighty, well, I'm gonna sign off for the day. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.